Wow. This is a beautiful, beautiful family. I love the atmosphere in this house. Nate and Amber, beautiful humans. I mean, they make me want to stay. We talked about it a little bit in the car, and then they said snow. We're out. Well, thank you so much, friends of the Perry Center. I want to thank you for inviting us to your party and to this beautiful celebration. I am excited to be here in Fargo tonight to do what I love to do the most, and that is to brag on Jesus. A few months back, I was doing that mindless scroll through Facebook. We all do it, just admit it. And I was at an appointment, and there was a reel that caught my eye. And the title of the reel was From Date, Rape, Drug to Extraordinary Love Story. Now the hook, it opened with a familiar true crime vibe voice. You know, the kind that's mysterious, that ominous tone, kind of like Dateline's Keith Morrison. And this is the question that he posed. He said, what happens when you have been saving yourself for the right guy most of your life? And suddenly, someone slips you a date rape drug and you find yourself pregnant. What would you do? Well, the voice was David Heavner, Hollywood actor, director, and now podcaster of the Last Evangelist podcast. The storyline had all the intrigue to make me stop and listen, and not because it was sensational or because it was clickbait, but because it was a story that I was intimately acquainted with. It was my story that he was about to tell thousands of people. When I was a little girl, I had a long plain vinyl record that narrated the story of Princess Aurora. So for our princess fans, you would probably also know her as Sleeping Beauty. And it was one of those long playing records that also had a book that read with it. I'm dating myself. I see somebody nodding their head over here. And Tinkerbell would tinker her bells to turn the page. And this is me in my room alone listening to the story of Sleeping Beauty over and over again. I had a robe that hung on the back of my door, and I would grab the arms of that robe and I would swing and dance to all the songs that had been written to make me believe in an enchanted love, a love that somebody would actually slay dragons to love the likes of me. And we're very familiar with her story. Her life had been maliciously, well, first of all, she was wandering through the forest one day, because that's what all princesses do. And she had a chance meeting of the prince that she was destined to marry, though neither of them knew that their parents had promised them to one another. And her promising life had been maliciously interrupted by the fairy of darkness, and with an evil attempt to cut it short with a curse, unless she was awakened by true love's kiss. So romantic love became very enchanting to me. But as I grew older, I began to wonder why. Was I simply a hopeless romantic? Or had I been clinging to fairy tales because deep down inside, I really feared that loving the likes of me might actually be impossible? It would be my father, that planted, and unknowingly so, but he planted that defeating idea in my head. I was led to believe early in life, because of my plump frame, that the chances of me ever attracting a true love would take a miracle, like a fairy tale. My circle of friends at the time, they were made up of all the local bands and groupies. We were 100% sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Let me say that, they were. I was all about the rock and roll. Drugs, recreationally, hardly worth a mention, but sex, not a chance, no way. Even though my weekends were full of parties and the relentless pressure to convert to the it's just sex club, I just couldn't. So I couldn't find it in me to be so casual about something so vulnerable and intimate. I could never shake that first conviction of saving myself for love. Well, it was Easter weekend, 1991, and my best friend and I had planned a road trip, and we were headed to, it was kind of our own little Thelma and Louise kind of road trip. That was kind of the vibe we were going for. We were escaping central Illinois. And our destination was Memphis, Tennessee. We were going to take in all the sights and sounds of the king of rock and roll and the Delta blues. And I'll admit, I have an affinity for Elvis Presley. It's something I inherited from my mother. I couldn't figure out how someone so endearing could also be just so dangerous. So we treated ourselves to the full tourist experience, from Beale Street to Graceland to Sun Studio, right back to Beale Street. And it was there on Beale Street that we closed out our last night by listening to some live blues and sipping some wine. We were feeling just a little bit sophisticated. Well, the waiter that was serving our table was especially attentive to me. I hadn't really noticed it was my friend who actually brought it to my attention. And in my usual self-loathing fashion, I just kind of rolled my eyes at her and I said, yeah, all right. But she challenged me and she said, Kim, if someone is actually showing interest in you right now, then your delusion of being undesirable is the only thing keeping you from entertaining it. All right, so she was right, partly. Though I was flattered that there was interest, my truth was I wasn't attracted back to this person. I just simply remained friendly. Well, as the night wore on, he grew relentless. He was relentless in his attempts to keep my attention, relentless in his push to get me alone. In turn, I was equally resistant. I was drawing lines, I was saying no, until suddenly my strength left my body. I'd never had an experience like that before. Lines were being drawn, lines were being crossed, and my no was no longer being heard. Insert the social media clip, what happens when you've been saving yourself for the right guy most of your life, and suddenly someone slips you a date rape drug. The hours that followed, I write in my book, Choosing Life After Rape. And what an incredibly tiny word. This little 4-letter word to describe probably one of the most vile and vacating experiences a person can have. I was an ordinary Midwestern girl on vacation. I was a virgin saving myself for love. Now suddenly I'm the victim of a rape crime. Once I arrived back at the hotel, my friend had just picked up the phone to call the police when I walked in. I explained to her what had happened, and we both shifted into escape mode. We packed as fast as we could. She drove me home as fast as she could, and I prayed as desperately as I could. Please, God, don't let me hate men. The weeks that followed were mentally suffocating. I startled very easily. I was exhibiting some signs of trauma, but I didn't know that. The violation hadn't just thrown me into a mode of shock. It had stolen, and not just stolen my virginity, but it was making me think that it had stolen my romantic dreams altogether. I mean, if I started out unlikely to marry, well, what was I now? Then came the news that had been haunting my thoughts for a month. The one thing I feared could possibly happen, happened, and I learned that I was pregnant. Growing up Catholic, I had always believed abortion was wrong, and I was vocal about it, even in the case of rape. But once I was caught in that exact circumstance, it was the only thing I could think about. Fear became my closest companion. Fear narrowed my vision. It silenced my long-held convictions, and suddenly abortion felt like a right. I saw it as my only way out of this nightmare. So I did what I said I would never do, and I scheduled an abortion. Before going through with it, I did break down and tell my parents about the violation and the baby and my plans to fix it all. But get this, it was my father's voice. That same voice that once shaded me with shame was now interrupting my life with a truth strong enough to break my despair. And he said, Kim, abortion is murder, and we do not do that. And he said, we. That we, it changed everything in a moment. He didn't distance himself from me. Instead, he actually stepped into my pain, willing to help me find a better way through. It was a divine interruption. My dad was making a God move, bending low to help lift me up. And the truth he spoke did two things for me. First, it freed me to know I was no longer pregnant and alone. The second thing it did was renewed my mind. It returned me to my original conviction. I knew abortion was wrong. Just really wanted somebody to tell me it would be okay. I didn't find that person. This baby was not someone that I needed to protect my life from. This baby was just as innocent of the crime as I was. This baby was a defenseless person I finally saw I needed to give my life for, even if it was just for a few months. Rape is a crime. Pregnancies resulting from rape involve 3 people: the criminal who deserves the punishment, and 2 innocent victims, the mother and the baby. One innocent person growing inside another innocent person. I ask you, who's the one who deserves the justice? They both do. Well, the next few months of my life read like all great stories do, dark and dangerous, with many surprising hairpin turns all along the way. I went from scheduling that abortion to canceling the abortion. I made a visit to our local pregnancy center where I found the same compassion I was finding at home, the same spirit of compassion I feel in this room tonight. It feels like home. So with their help, I planned an adoption. I gave birth to my first child, a beautiful baby girl, and I placed her in the arms of adoptive parents that I chose myself. Surprisingly, the placement was not the relief I had been expecting. It actually felt kind of heavy and hollow. The adoptive couple was sweet and deserving, and I knew that my decision was answering decades of desperate prayers. It was also answering 9 months of my own desperate prayers. There was no celebration, no new sense of righteousness, no felt reward in the selfless giving, no grieving. I just felt blank about the whole experience. So after handing her to the adoptive parents, my mom and I were headed home. And my mom dropped me at the doors of the nearest drugstore so I could grab some personal items. And while I'm standing in line at the register, the young woman at the register asks me her happy question of the day: how's your day going? Man, I didn't know what to say. I kept searching the depths of my brain to try to find something casual enough to answer her with. And all I could do was what most of us would do, that 4-letter word when we say, I'm fine. That first night home, I stared at the ceiling, wondering out loud to God, how am I ever going to get my life back? I thought that's what this decision was going to do. I thought I was going to get my life back. My parents room was next door. My mother, she was praying out loud to God, and her prayer was how much she wished she could just go get that baby back. She knew what I had done. I don't think I did, but she did. So before her grief had settled, she heard God whisper to her heart. He said, "She's still yours." The next morning, my mom came in my room and shared that news, and she said, "I'll stay home and I'll watch her while you work if I was to change my mind." And there it is, another parent, bending low like God. She offered to lay her life down for us, so changed my mind. I did, and I was able to reverse that decision. Adoption is beautiful, and it can be the best choice for so many. However, it just was not the best choice for me and my family. I learned later that Colossians 3:15 tells us to let peace be our umpire, and I realized that's what was missing for me. It just didn't have peace about that decision. Conception changes you. It changes women into mothers, and you cannot reverse that. I learned the truth, and that was I was never, ever going to be able to get my life back. I was only going to be able to get it redeemed. And looking back now, I can see the Father, God himself, speaking divine interruptions through my dad and then rerouting me through my mom, all of my first thoughts turning into second thoughts. All those interruptions turned out to be so much more than just life-saving. They were providential. We didn't know that the first 4 years of my daughter's life would also turn out to be the last 4 years of my mother's life. My daughter, Andy, she turned out to be my only child and the only grandchild my mother ever got to love on. So I'll be honest with you, choosing to parent as a single is hard. Of course, every parent in here with the most perfect of circumstances will tell you it's hard. And every choice, every single choice in an unplanned pregnancy, it's hard. But choosing life, even though it's hard, is the one decision that is going to return more life. All those hard things uniquely positioned me to cling to a man I had not known like this before. I learned that he had been waiting behind the scenes of my life this whole time, this entire mess. He was waiting back there, ready to love me as his very own. He dared to take full responsibility to care for us. He never second-guessed what it might cost him to love the likes of us. And he proudly brought us into his family and provided for our home. This man convinced us both that we were worth his love. And he turned out to be so much more than the fairy tale I had dreamed of as a little girl. He was and still is my one and only perfect love, Jesus Christ. He not only saved me and made me a new creation, he filled me with his Spirit and then healed me of my self-hatred. But he also did something. He gave me a promise to redeem my romantic dreams that had settled in the dust of Beale Street 9 months back. Before my mother had passed, Jesus had spoke through her prayers that there would be a man for me that hears God's voice. I said, let's go. Let's get on with it. So I believed him, and I took that promise, and I lived the rest of my life according to that expectation. And he helped me raise my daughter, Andy, in the light of his love and not the ugly shame of a crime. John 1:3 assured me that there is not one thing or one person that has ever come into existence that hasn't come through him. So in other words, life begins in Christ. Conception is always holy, even when the sex is not. My daughter never was, never has been, and never will be a painful reminder of a tragedy. She has always been the joyous reward of choosing life over death. Pregnancies in the case of rape are rare, yet it is one of the most popular objections to ending abortion. One of the few times in my life I get to be popular. So, this is why I wrote my book. We all need that story. The objection is a hard one because the compassion for the mother is so strong, but it has to be just as strong for that innocent child. They call us the hard cases, the exceptions, and I will tell you it's been 33 years, and my daughter, Andy, is quite the exception. She is a beautiful woman of God who knows her worth, and so much so that she called herself my trophy daughter. She married the boy next door and has gifted me with 3 grandsons so far. Would you like to see some pictures? All right, well, let's go for number 1. That's Andy. The center picture is the day she was born. I thought those little dark, wispy curls made her look like an angel. You can go to slide number 2. My father in the top corner, that is Jack. My mom underneath, that is Linda. And that is Andy and I at her culinary graduation. Now, that's the boy next door. If you can catch in that picture, the look on his face is really geared to me. Because I'm the one all excited about the baby, and he's like, why are you in this picture? So, before you go to the next slide, I do want to let you know that in her senior year of high school, she had to do a research paper, and she actually researched abortion. She didn't know everything that was involved in an abortion, and she was horrified when she came home from school that afternoon and asked me, Mom, do you know what happens during an abortion? And I said, well, yeah, I don't recall that we ever had this conversation. She was so shocked. She said, that's it. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I am going to repopulate the earth. Next slide. She won't let me show pictures of the boys till they're 18, so that's the best I can do, bellies. So she is 3 boys in, and I'm just going to go ahead and make the announcement tonight. I got a call last week. Baby number 4 is on its way. I watched her walk down the aisle of her own wedding, myself still single, still saving myself for love, imagine that, and still waiting on a promise of my romantic dreams coming true. It would be exactly 1 year to the day of her wedding that I was finally getting to say yes to a wedding of my own. And you'll get to meet my Prince Charming, Gary. He'll be at the book table tonight. Our extraordinary love story reads like a fairy tale written by God, and I'm being totally honest, I'm not exaggerating. Gary was on the other side of our little city. This whole time my life was playing out like this, and you know what? He was a man who had been saving himself for a promised love by God, just like I was. And he was the one that my mom knew would come for me someday, the one who heard God's voice say, I was his girl. Now, I'm sorry, he doesn't slay dragons if you're expecting any tips, but he does slay some Christian metal guitar riffs, so all Striper fans can head towards the book table. He'll talk your ear off. Slide, or pick number 5, you can go to that. That's me and Gary on our wedding day, and Andy and Zach with us in the corner. Gary and I, we now stand deeply passionate, not just about one another, but passionate for this generation to know that no matter what is left of your romantic dreams, even in the case of rape, God is eager to give them extraordinary love stories too. Our love story became a book. Our book has become our mission, and our mission carries another promise, and that's to turn the moral compass of a generation back to the Father's voice, back to the God of the romantic. I did it. The girls that we heard from tonight, they did it. By the unexpected grace of God, we did the unthinkable, and we chose life against all odds. And now that choice for life is working to save so much more. And I hope you can feel it tonight. I hope you feel the excitement of the impossible becoming possible. I hope you feel the inspiration of being a part of making dreams come true. The empowerment, how about that? How do you guys feel about this? We can do this. Everyone in this room, together, we can change the course of a generation from choosing death to choosing life. Yes? Yes. Those emotions that you're feeling, those are holy. That is the heart of God inviting us to be the voice of the Father in someone else's pro-life story this year. And apparently, Nate's got plans to lay out a lot of pro-life stories this year. So I'm sure that some of us were somewhat excited about the federal government voting to limit funding to Planned Parenthood for a year. Thanks for that. And what that has done has created a crucial window of opportunity for pregnancy centers, maternity homes, for us to step into the spotlight and start trending in this nation. We have to be the answer. You know we are. We have to get in front of it and show them that we are. So it's true that at the same time that news was coming out, a lot of our pro-life advocates started voicing about how excited they were, and they used this term. They said, less abortions means more babies live, exclamation point. And it does, and that's wonderful. But my heart got a little heavy because all I could think about were all the women who are sitting there knowing their choices have narrowed and they don't know what we have to give them. Their question is, what about me? What does this pro-life movement have for me? While all of us are crying out for women to reconsider aborting their babies because the sacrifice to see it, because they deserve the sacrifice to see it live, but so do these women. They deserve us to make the sacrifice to see them live healthy lives. So it was 4:08 on a Friday morning. I woke up and I heard God speak to my spirit. He said, women will value life, the life in them, once they come to value the life I first gave them, which was their own. Nate walked Gary and I into one of the rooms at the Perry Center, and I was so excited to see how beautifully decorated by Amber the room was, because it screams worth and value. You matter, we love you, and you deserve to be celebrated. You deserved to be cherished. That was one room I walked into, and you guys did that. You are making sure that women aren't just saving their babies, but they are getting an opportunity to feel their worth. So that is what has been so impressive to me about the Perry Center, is that they care about the whole family. And they desire to be the Father's voice in these women's lives. The same voice that was working in my story is now working to save babies and mamas at the Perry Center. And aren't we all tonight passionate to see these women saved from the hellish regret of abortion and some really hellish circumstances? So, before I get to the cherry on top of my sundae, it's coming, I just want to revisit why we're here tonight. We have come not only to see what God has been doing through your giving this past year, which is off the charts. We also want to know what God is getting ready to do with the unplanned pregnancies coming your way in the coming year. And tonight you got to witness the voice of the Father plotting out my journey like T-roads all along the way, signs strategically placed on a map, giving me a choice by choice, leading me to life and a life abundant. The voice that interrupted my abortion plans, that redirected my adoption plans, that convinced me that I was worth his love, that is the same voice that brought all of us together in this room tonight. You're here because you're already committed, You're here because you're wondering. You're here because he led you. He brought you here tonight. Stories of women who, and you get to be a part of stories of women who didn't abort because they found out they were no longer alone. You get to be a part of stories of babies who were born to change the world, or maybe just change their family. And you get to be about the stories of grandparents, like my parents, who made room for the hard case. Stories like my daughter and my own, where dreams were coming true. So we know it's been given to all of mankind to know what is right. People just need more stories. Stories convincing them that doing the right thing is possible and it is beautiful. So this legacy of saving babies and empowering their parents is a direct outcome of your personal legacy in giving, and collectively a legacy that you are building here in Fargo, a legacy of life. So tonight you will be given some envelopes, and in those envelopes you are going to have listed before you 3 different ways that you are going to be able to participate in these beautiful pro-life stories. The first, of course, is that of the becoming a monthly partner. This is what I call the go gift. This is the gift that keeps the Perry Center going all year long. It's the gift that they depend on, that they budget from. It's kind of like the gas in the tank. It supplies for all the operations. Then we have the make a one-time gift opportunity. And these are the gifts that make the Perry Center dreams grow. This is, to me, like being the undercover boss. I'm coming in with a gift that God has put upon my heart, and you walk in and you find out that is the exact gift that was needed. It doesn't matter how small or how large. Gary and I tonight, we're going to participate in the one-time gift. 10% of all book sales tonight are going back to the Perry Center. But we've had that opportunity with our own local pregnancy center during COVID, who could not have their fall banquet. We were in a position of receiving an inheritance, and we took 10% through the doors of that center. And she was so moved because it answered the budget for the rest of the year. She said, this is what we would normally get at a banquet. The next opportunity for you is to volunteer your time. And you heard this beautiful story here of the mother mentors, people coming alongside. My daughter and I were constantly involved in small groups through our church, and God was continually putting us into these groups where fathers were adopting my daughter. Every season of her life had just the right voice in it. And this is about building a friendship. It's not about teaching a lesson. It's about being a friend and inviting these girls into your life. So Nate has expressed tonight that for the coming year, the goal is $200,000 tonight, but Gary and I already prayed about that. And we think God wants to do above and beyond all that Nate has thought or imagined, because that's who God is. So that's what Gary and I were asking of the Lord. You may have already come in with a predetermined amount. I don't want you to write that down yet, because I've got that cherry on the sundae that I want to share with you. If we could have picture number 6, please. Andy and I are a part of the 1% Club. That means 1% of pregnancies that result from rape. The hard cases is what they call us, and it's used to argue for abortion. They argue that living with the consequence of raising a baby you didn't ask for is just too brutal to bear. Well, I'm going to make a very bold statement tonight, and I'll try not to get emotional, but it's too late. Choosing life in the case of rape healed me. When Andy was a senior in high school, I felt so accomplished. We really did it. We did it. She was going to graduate. She was a great kid. She still is a great kid. But it felt like such a huge accomplishment that we made a trip to Florida, but on our way we stopped through Memphis. And those two pictures on the far left is Andy and I making graffiti on the fieldstone wall in front of Graceland. Andy's cheating though, she's writing on the sidewalk. But we wrote scriptures to give God the praise for everything he did. And we blessed that city. Then you fast forward where I meet my Prince Charming, we get married, we go on our honeymoon. And I had a mind-blowing redemptive encounter on our honeymoon on Beale Street. It was equivalent to an awakening of a true love's kiss. God had set us up to walk through the doors of the quote-unquote scene of the crime. And my brand new husband asked me if I was okay. And I was so okay, I couldn't believe it. My healing was 100% complete on this side of heaven. And then, a couple years later, Andy gets pregnant with her firstborn. That's the picture, her and I together in front of the location, and that was all Andy's idea. That's her vengeance picture, where what the enemy thought he was gonna do evil, we turned around and we did good, and she reproduced, and she's continuing to reproduce. This is why we give. This is why I tell my story. Jesus is so beautiful and what he does with our lives. We all know the scripture, and I'm going to close here. Deuteronomy 30:19 says that I have set before you life and death. Therefore, choose life so that you may live, you and your descendants. That word live doesn't just mean to breathe. It means to be revived, to be kept, to be nourished, restored, repaired, made whole, saved. That's what the Perry Center is doing. That's the testimony of these mothers and their babies. So in the context of a woman choosing life, that promise goes to her first. And this is what I love about the Perry Center. They take care of the whole family. When a woman chooses life, it doesn't just save the baby, it begins to heal the mother too. And because she chooses life, you know what she's doing? She's aligning herself with Jesus Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life. So there you have it. God took my little girl dreams of a destined love, and he wrapped him around that malicious, evil attempt to steal it away. And he fit that into my daring choice for life. And he worked it into a divine plan, a plan that echoes Genesis 50:20 to see so many more lives saved. So if I had to answer that podcaster's question as a listener, what would you do? I would say, without reservation, I would choose life all over again. So grab those envelopes, and in the words of our dearest life advocate, Charlie Kirk, let's make heaven crowded. Thank you.